Hey you! You're finally awake. Hi guys, it's Aaron here from Push Square, and I'm joined by the one and only Liam Richardson. He was an adventurer once until he took an arrow to the knee, but how are you today, sir?
That meme, it died in 2011, but maybe it is due a comeback, much like the game itself, right?
Hey, it's the anniversary of the legendary arrow to the knee meme. Let's bring it back now. Push Square, November 2021. Let's make this happen. I'll leave it to you guys in the comments. But yes, in case you haven't already guessed, today marks the 10th anniversary, rather scarily, of Skyrim launching on PlayStation 3 and other consoles on 11/11/11, November 11th, 2011. And we're here to reminisce and talk about it just a little bit, because the Skyrim Anniversary Edition, in case you needed another way to play it, or indeed buy Skyrim again, there is now a way for you to do that thanks to Bethesda. So yeah, me and Liam, we're just gonna, reminisce, discuss about our favourite thoughts of this game.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of your favourite memories of playing Skyrim, Liam? Were you there on day one? What platform did you play it on? Let's hear it out.
Yeah, so I was there day one. I was at university at the time, but a fresh-faced 19-year-old sat in his tiny little university bedroom. I remember I bought a big pizza and picked up the game on PlayStation 3, and I must have played it for easily, 12 hours.
Why do all the best gaming memories involve pizza as well, as a little side note?
I think because the best gaming memories always sort of coincide with being of an age where you can eat terribly all the time and it not have any consequences to you.
Yeah, I agree.
I was there day one, and that game absolutely blew me away. I think it's easy now, 10 years later, to really not think about how influential and how exciting that game was when it first launched, because this game has been part of the cultural, conversation for a decade, because it's never really gone away. It's a bit like Grand Theft Auto 5 in that sense. It's always a present part of every console generation. And indeed, we're recording this on a day where Skyrim is being released again for its third generation console. But at the time, and I read some reviews before we recorded this as well, from the game's original launch, to try and get myself back in that headspace. This was a masterpiece. This was a video game that came out, it smashed all expectations, and it delivered on the promise that it made in the initial trailers, and built upon everything that Oblivion set out to achieve as well. And Fallout 3, for that matter. It was, at the time, the best game Bethesda Game Studios had made. And indeed, you could argue, is still the best game that Bethesda have created and published.
I think I'm right there with you. It might suffer from a severe lack of Sean Bean and Patrick Stewart, two amazing British talents that, we're lucky enough to have grace Oblivion. But no, I'm in total agreement. I wasn't quite there on day one, but I did play Skyrim. I think I bought it pre-owned a little while after the fact, and I totally concur with what you're saying. I still think it's one of the most grand and impressively, high in scope games that I've ever played. It's particularly in terms of games set in the high fantasy setting, and there's a reason why it's still considered one of the best open world fantasy RPGs 10 years later. I think there's very few games that even come close to rivaling Skyrim for that claim. I think The Witcher 3 comes to mind, arguably, but even then, The Witcher 3, you're very much playing Geralt's story, and in this one, the beauty of Skyrim is that you get to go forward and create your own, and no Skyrim, no The Witcher 3. I really think it's as simple as that. Not that I'm saying that The Witcher 3 is better than Skyrim per se. Both games have their strengths, but I think it says a lot that people are still going back to Skyrim 10 years on, even though it probably blows my mind that there could be a 10-year-old or 11-year-old out there today yet to have played Skyrim, and they could possibly just be about to dive in for the very first time as a result of the Anniversary Edition. So yeah, in terms of cult status, it doesn't get really any more grand than Skyrim, does it? But you mentioned Fallout 3, and also a great game, but it does suffer more so than Skyrim from looking a little bit dated, I would argue, and that's probably why Bethesda have tried to sequelize that as opposed to the Elder Scrolls as much, because it's still I know they've introduced new visual enhancements and stuff, but it's still quite the looker, aside from some jank today.
I think that the reason why is that it's such a cohesive vision of this landscape. Right? It took... Fallout 3 is a very bland and
Oppressive.
grim looking game. Yeah, and I mean that's by design, right? It's a post-apocalypse. But Skyrim kind of it reads from the same hymn book in a lot of ways, in the sense that it's this cold and oppressive landscape, both aesthetically and also, politically. The story revolves around this nation in turmoil. But exploring Skyrim, there's nothing else like it in terms of just the visual and the atmosphere. It is cold and it's harsh, but there's pockets of autumnal forests and the way that the wind blows across, wide open plains that are decaying and dying, but it just has this unmistakable quality that even 10 years later, like you say, with some small visual enhancements, have made it look more modern and more of the time. It's got this just intoxicating sense of place to it that I think was, for me, when I think of Skyrim, and we've been speaking about Skyrim a little bit this week off air, and I'm actually, for some reason, really excited to play through this game again for the second time.
You're one of those, Liam. You're part of the problem. You'll buy Skyrim again.
But it's like, I mean, I'm the person who's played, I play Resident Evil 4 every year, so I own it on every system. I am one of those people. But when I think about Skyrim, I think about some of the quests, I think about the Dark Brotherhood, I think about these story beats that everyone remembers, but mainly when I think about Skyrim, I think about just exploring, just walking through this world and listening to the gentle ambient soundtrack and stumbling across something, a small village, a little hamlet, some traveller by the side of the road, and it's just that sense of a journey and an adventure that I think Skyrim encapsulated so much better than any other open world game at the time.
That's the reason we keep on coming back to it. But you're right to mention just like the variety found in Skyrim, because I'll admit, like, every time Skyrim comes to mind, whether it was a result of the marketing or, some of the locations you get to visit early on in the game, I always kind of think of it as this cold, blustery, mountainous place. But then when you think about it, that's really just a small slice of the locations and cities you get to explore. So I wouldn't advise heading up to the mountains relatively on, otherwise you'll get your arse kicked by a troll who just so happens to be passing by.
I think about that troll, bloody hell.
I bet it was the same troll that Bethesda put there on purpose, I'm sure. Don't come here yet. But yeah, obviously hundreds upon hundreds of quests. The Dark Brotherhood, as you mentioned, a personal favourite. I know that people are particularly affectionate for the vampire stuff, which is, still notable even now. Like, there aren't enough vampire games out there, but Skyrim, as well as being everything else, it manages to, have that going for it. So yeah, the original release obviously 10 years ago today, but it did eventually come to PlayStation 4 on October 28th, 2016. It brought with it reduced load times, volumetric lighting, but most importantly, something that had already been bubbling up on other platforms, specifically PC. It was the PS4 version that introduced mods to consoles in a very sort of Luddite-ish way, admittedly, but I think, we can't talk about Skyrim and have it as part of the conversation without discussing just how much of an impact the community around Skyrim and the mods that came as a result of it, the memes, yes, Thomas the Tank Engine as a dragon, we all love that, and we see Thomas's big old face. Particularly on PlayStation, modding is something that's been quite contentious with Skyrim. I think it's fair to say other platforms have handled that a little bit better, but there's still ways for PlayStation players to kind of have fun with it, and it's all as a result of that community.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like you say, the PC modding community is always such an important part of any PC release, and you look at Valve games as an example of how modding communities can keep games alive for decades after the original developer have maybe moved on, and Skyrim is no different. In fact, any of Bethesda's games are no different in that sense. Creator Club, yeah, I mean, it was quite controversial when it first launched. I think it was a bit of a teething issue on Bethesda's part, but what we have now is a way for people to expand upon the core release in interesting ways, and also support creators who have put in work to create content. And I think, having that as a feature is certainly no bad thing. I would love to see more mods come to console. I understand why they don't. I think it is a difficult process, and Bethesda have been, to my knowledge, one of the only companies that have broached it. Yeah, I mean, having those mods there is fantastic. There is always a bit of an issue around, how these mods link up to one another. One thing I'm a little bit wary of with this anniversary edition is what mods have been added. Do they enhance the core experience? Are they there just as a way of repackaging Skyrim for a new generation? Is it just we'll throw stuff in? I know there is new stuff in I mean, you get it for free anyway, stuff like fishing. You know, you don't need to spend a pound to get additional enhancements. You can upgrade to PlayStation 5 for free if you want the PlayStation 4 version. Something I didn't know. We spoke about this offline. I was like, what do I have to pay £15 or not? Turns out I don't. I can pay £15 just to get basically a curated selection of mods instead of having to pay for them individually.
Speaking of mods, you only need to look at how ceremonious it's been, because The Forgotten City, which is, for many, a Game of the Year contender for a lot of people this year, originally started out life as a Elder Scrolls Skyrim mod. And obviously it's since gone off and spawned into its own game, and I think people are really, really loving it. But I was playing that only the other day, and even though it's been developed in like its own new engine now with different assets and stuff like that, the essence of Skyrim is still very much there. And you know, with this anniversary edition release, I think one of the major factors and appeals for people that are just about to pick it up and pay money for that specific upgrade is one of the major community narrative-driven mods. It might not be an entirely new Bethesda-made expansion, but it is at least something for, you know, newcomers and veterans to enjoy.
Oh, is that actually something that's is that part of the anniversary package? Is like a community?
So I forget what it's actually called. It's got a name. But it's one of like headline features when you look on Bethesda's website, so it might be worth spending those extra pennies after all, Liam, not just for fishing.
I didn't even look at the website, Aaron. That's how much of a sterling professional I am.
That's all right. There's a lot going on this week. You know, we've got GTA, Skyrim. So, but yeah, the last thing to say in terms of the content of the game is that, you know, Skyrim continues to live on. And while it might be a bit gutting that The Elder Scrolls' future on PlayStation might not have that much more to it, I think, you know, we can still go back to Skyrim to experience and immerse yourself in a grand adventure, which is something that Cyberpunk 2077 failed to do. And I think that's the closest sort of most recent example to being gifted this highly detailed world to explore.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I think Cyberpunk was 100% the game that felt like it had the same level of hype as Skyrim did. Like, in terms of cultural conversation, it felt like everyone was excited for Skyrim. It felt like the game that everyone rushed out to buy, and Cyberpunk in a lot of ways was the same. Obviously, the difference being Skyrim lived up to the expectations.
Yeah.
And Cyberpunk didn't. But yeah, it is wild to think of a time when there were these like tentpole releases that were this popular. I think we're in an era now where so many good games come out so frequently. I don't think a single game can have that much hype. But, you know, November 2011 was a very busy month anyway. You had things like Arkham City, I think Uncharted 3 had just released maybe a month prior.
Skyward Sword did just come out on Wii, I believe.
Well, I mean, it had, but I remember it wasn't. It came out the same day as Modern Warfare 3, is all I'll say about Skyward Sword in terms of cultural significance at the time.
Anyone who picked up Skyrim, you picked the right game beginning with SK and high fantasy elements, let it be said, if you owned a certain platform.
Yeah, but come at us, Nintendo Life. What are you going to do about that, eh?
Yeah, there you
We're
go.
dunking on Skyward Sword.
Hello there, Skyrim people. But obviously, for as great as Skyrim is, we've got to remain impartial. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, particularly in the land of PlayStation, because I think it's safe to say the PS3 version, it didn't go off without its issues, and it was by far the most janky version. Enemies falling from the sky, getting caught in the world randomly. You know, you got the traditional amount of Bethesda jankiness, but the PlayStation 3 issue, I think, as a result of the cell architecture, you had things like the game would just stop working, Hearthfire and Dragonborn expansions both launched later than other platforms. But historically, if your save grew any larger than 5 megabytes, I believe Skyrim was just rendered unplayable, which was a bit of an arrow to the knee, as it were, for anyone who wanted to play it on PlayStation. So it says a lot that, you know, when we eventually did get that version on PlayStation 4, a lot of those issues, you know, had gone away, and it paved the way forward for PlayStation to enjoy Skyrim proper. It is crazy. Because I'm one of those players that I'll just constantly rewrite one save a lot of the time.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so I very rarely have multiple. If I like a particular boss or whatever, I'll just, you know, constantly save over the same one.
Oh, wow.
Do you not do that?
So I don't. I'm a serial saver. That's my issue. I often walk away from a game with about 150 separate saves. And this might just be a hangover from childhood when saves could corrupt. but
Yeah.
I'm always just terrified I'm going to lose a save, so I'll always save in separate slots.
Well, as we say, Skyrim Anniversary Edition, it's out today. You've no doubt been inundated with several retrospective and reflective pieces, including this very one that you're watching right now. But before we wrap up, I've got a bit of a surprise for Mr. Meevil himself, Liam.
Ooh.
This is a quiz I've affectionately called "What has Skyrim been porting to?" Because obviously that's become a bit of a meme in and of itself. I'm going to test your wits. You might have answered some of this already, annoyingly. I'll get over it, I promise. So, the PlayStation Vita, by any chance?
No. I think I always wanted it to, but I mean, can you imagine if they ported an Elder Scrolls game to Vita?
Oh, imagine in 2021, no less. There you go. I mean, you can
surprisingly.
I guess technically you could remote play the PS4 version to your Vita and play it that way.
Okay. Yep, that's it.
Semantics.
Okay, loophole. All right, okay.
But technically no, so we'll give you that one. PlayStation 5. Has Skyrim come to PlayStation 5 finally?
Yes, because it's getting a native upgrade as part of this week's anniversary release.
Yeah, you're right. It's not explicitly getting like a retail PS5 release, I don't think, but there is a way around it. Yeah, I was hoping to catch you there. Next one, PlayStation VR.
Yes. Ooh. Was that around the same time as the Anniversary Collection release?
It was like a couple of months after the system, the headset itself launched, I want to say, whenever that was. 2016, 2017?
2016, I think.
Yeah. You can tell we've done our research, haven't you?
It was 2016, because I was in Japan at the time when it came out. Just a humble brag. I was in Tokyo when the PlayStation Vita.
I was going to say that's where
VR even.
That's where you want to be for a major Western release. You know, in Japan. That is where you want to be.
When I have no money. Yes.
The major release of a Western RPG. Has Skyrim come to Android at all? Android smartphone? Can you play it
natively? No.
You're correct.
Via Xbox Game Pass streaming.
I've never even heard of that. What are you? You're talking gibberish right now. I can't even get the words out. Game. Nah, it's not happening. But yeah, I suppose that's possible. Otherwise, you'll have to suffer with the Elder Scrolls Blades on Android. Which, less said about that, the better. I'd rather go to the dentist, Aaron, than play Elder Scrolls Blades. Oh my god, why not do both at the same time and then, really torture yourself? I wouldn't advise you do that. Samsung Smart Refrigerator. Can you play Skyrim on it? The world needs to know. I feel like there was a meme about this, and I can't remember if it was like an anniversary skit that Bethesda did. Is the answer no for smart fridges, but you can on Amazon's Alexa? I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There was a version of Skyrim that was temporarily playable on Alexa, and yeah, there was a marketing campaign featuring Keegan-Michael Key of Jordan and Peele fame, where he was, supposedly playing it. Never say never for Skyrim. It could happen. Do you think because we're not getting Elder Scrolls 6, we're just not. I think Starfield being an Xbox exclusive and part of the acquisition, we're not going to see Elder Scrolls 6 on PlayStation systems. But do you think we'll see Skyrim on future systems? Do you think there'll be some kind of loophole where they'll keep releasing Skyrim for future PlayStations? Well, you'd hope that the backwards compatibility situation would have been resolved well enough that you can at least play the PS4/PS5 version on future PlayStation consoles, I'd want to say. But it does throw up the question of, will PlayStation invest in a Skyrim-like of its own somehow? That's really interesting, because my gut instinct is that they won't. Oh, really? Yeah, I just think that I don't think Sony have ever really gone out of their way to compete in spaces where they think they're lacking exclusivity. Although I'm saying that, and immediately I'm thinking about Killzone. But PlayStation making a lot of acquisitions recently. All they need is to snap up one team, I'd say. And I believe I'm right in saying this, but before God of War got rebooted over at Sony Santa Monica, the rumor was that they were working on an open world RPG. And I think it was one of the writers from the Fallout series that was supposedly on it before it got canned. That's interesting. So it doesn't bode well for the future, I suppose, but there is precedent for them at least trying. And yeah, I guess we'll just see whether they've already got something in the works. Maybe they're planning to quietly get something out before, Elder Scrolls 6. But it's interesting. It's interesting to think about. My gut says no. Although would I like to see something like, Naughty Dog tackle a huge open world RPG? Let's do it. Instead of remaking The Last of Us for the third time, maybe. Yeah. That'd be quite nice. Or they could they could pull a Playground Games and just get Polyphony to make an open world RPG. Step out of the racing line for just a second.
Oh, Lord,
what could
can you
be?
imagine?
Anyway, guys, I think that just about does it for mine and Liam's reminiscence on Skyrim. On this, its 10th anniversary. As already mentioned, you can pick up the Skyrim Anniversary Edition from today onwards on PS4 and technically PlayStation 5 as well. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like and consider subscribing to stay up to date with everything else PlayStation related. But until then, I want to thank you for watching. Liam, I would advise that you see a doctor about that knee. You know, it's been 10 years. Get that arrow out of it, boy. You know, you don't deserve it. Let's do it.
It's rancid by this point. It's honking. It smells so bad.
You don't want to see it. Lop the leg off, I say. But yeah, until next time, from me and Liam, bye-bye for now.
Bye.